1999, I was a pedestrian hit by a car, and it was a drunk driver hit and run. And so it was really bad. I was in ICU for a number of days, had, a traumatic brain injury, face all messed up, left leg was shattered, lungs collapsed, very hard stuff. So was in the hospital for a long period of time and struggled. And so I feel like the more, I ebb and flow through beautiful times of joy and harmony and still times of struggle and suffering and pain is that I keep space to be curious about myself and what I'm feeling and my relationships. And the yoga practice is kind of the constant space I've created. So perhaps that's where, like, you would, maybe someone would have a mindfulness meditation practice.
Hello everyone, this is Dr. Kasim Al-Mashat, registered psychologist, yoga teacher, mindfulness teacher, and founder of the Center for Mindfulness Canada in North Vancouver. Today's guest is a real treat. It's Lauren Roegele, and the reason it's a real treat, every now and then we meet people that truly inspire us. Not because life is easy. Lauren, for me, has been this being that shines bright despite life's challenges. And she really struck me the first time I met her. And really fortunate that I can call her my yoga teacher. I did the teacher training back in, what was it, 1824, so long ago. It was back 2014, so about 8 years ago. So I just want to extend a warm welcome to you before I share more of your background. So really, so good to see you.
Thank you. So good to see you.
Yes, thank you for joining us today. So for those of you who are not as familiar with Lauren's work, Lauren has a deep and personal connection to the healing benefit of Hatha Yoga. After being hit by a car and enduring many surgeries and complications, she discovered yoga and immersed herself in the practice, changing her life forever. Yoga helped her find a way through her pain and back to a new, and I love this, inspired version of her former self. What a beautiful way of putting it. Lauren's warrior-like devotion to the practice, and I can attest to that, for sure, has led her on many diverse paths, all of which have supported her in endless curiosity for all things movement, breath, and mindfulness. Along with her dedication to the practice, Lauren is a level 2 facial stretch therapist and has participated in many different business endeavors, including owning and operating a yoga studio in White Rock, British Columbia in Canada, program director and faculty teacher for the Vancouver School of Yoga, and most recently, Basa Fitness, a US company, the Studio Flow co-creator. She currently lives in South Surrey, British Columbia, with two of the loves of her life, her husband, Cameron, and her daughter, Stella. What a beautiful bio. So again, a warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. So I wonder if we can begin with where it all began. What even led you to being curious of yoga and the human potential for change in the middle of adversity? Where did it all begin?
Well, I don't know if it was as conscious as I would like to think it was. It was really a bonding experience with my mom. So my mom was has always been a movement advocate, a fitness junkie, whatever you want to call it, loves to move her body, a good athlete. And she was doing yoga at the time. And I had, back in 1999, I was a pedestrian hit by a car, and it was a drunk driver hit and run. And so it was really bad. I was in ICU for a number of days, had, traumatic brain injury, face all messed up, left leg was shattered, lungs collapsed,
Oh.
very hard stuff. So was in the hospital for a long period of time, struggled, to keep it a sort of a short version, struggled a lot with physical issues and injuries. And I was 17 at the time. I was going into my senior year of high school. So when something like that happens at that sort of pivotal time in your life, it really, and I would like to think at any time in your life, it really changes who you are. And I come from a very academic, stoic, beautiful, strong, wise family. However, not necessarily the let's talk about our feelings type of family. Maybe some people can relate.
Right.
And yeah, let's fast forward to a few years later. So about 2 years later, I am struggling through college in Seattle, and I'm coming home frequently because I'm either in pain or really in just a depressive state. And internally, I was unaware. I wasn't diagnosing myself as depression. The doctors were very good about dealing with my physical ailments and injuries, but not necessarily ever addressing anything about how are you feeling about this. It was a drunk driver, so I had to go through a court case. I was dealing constantly with ICBC to help pay for, which is Insurance Corporation of British Columbia, to pay for medical and the different doctors I was seeing and the different surgeries I was needing to have. And I spiraled into a very dark depression. And I can speak to it now so clearly, of course, because I have the wisdom from perspective and years of work and whatnot. And so I was suicidal. I had finally hit my rock bottom and was planning my suicide. And I decided that knowing how selfish it was, I wanted to bond and connect with my family. I wanted my family to know that I loved them very much and that it wasn't about them, it was about me. And so, again, not really necessarily coming from a very let's talk about our feelings type of family, I couldn't just bring it up. It was something I thought, well, the way I'm going to go bond with my mom and remind her that I love her is to go spend time with her. And so I wanted to sneak into something she was doing. And so she was going to a yoga class, and I popped my head up and said, well, can I come? And she kind of looked at me like, we've never really had any interest in it, but of course, sure, come along. And
Pleasantly surprised, probably. She was, yeah.
Yeah, she was a bit taken back. Again, at that time in my life, I was dealing with very dark depression. So it was very aware. They were aware that something was happening. I wasn't, no, we weren't talking about it, but I wasn't the person that I was. I was in a lot of pain. I was very down. I spent a lot of time sleeping. I was moody. I was trying to just get through college. Yeah, was isolating myself from other people, some of the very common things that we see. Yeah, and very common things with post-traumatic stress disorder. But again, those terms and those words weren't being taught to me. I had no idea what that was, aside from veterans having had something like that.
Yeah.
I just knew that I was in a very heavy, dark place. So then I go to this yoga class with my mom, and she's a very active, fit, amazing woman. And so she goes to a power yoga class. And if you've ever been, you have, but if anyone else out there has ever been to a power yoga class, it's fast paced. It's breath induced. You're inhaling and exhaling with every movement. And I was, 40, maybe 50 pounds heavier, in a lot of pain. And my mom kind of nudged me to go speak to the teacher prior to the class beginning and let him know that, what was going on. And so I just briefly said, I'm recovering from some pretty major injuries. And, if you have any ideas on how I can, help myself in class. And he kind of looked at me like, ooh.
Like,
and
what
just kind
to
of
do? Yeah.
you go over there, here's some blocks, and
And this was a couple of years after. This was
this is around 2001. Yeah,
right,
2001.
right.
Yeah. Yeah, so I got hit by the car in 1999, and we're talking about 2001, around that. And I made it through the class. I was very aware of my lack of mobility in that moment. However, it was the first time in a long time that I didn't have the time to ruminate. to
Mm.
stew in the sadness and the heaviness. It
Mm.
was about inhaling and move, exhale and move, inhale, move, exhale, move. And so that transition from my head into my body
Mm.
um, was very revealing. And at the end, when you lie in shavasana and corpse pose in final resting, I had a release, another emotional release. And that wasn't a new thing to me, but it was a beautiful awakening to the fact that I didn't want to die.
Oh.
I didn't want to live like this anymore. And I didn't know how to live like this anymore. And I needed help and I needed to ask for help. And it took whatever this process of moving and breathing, and there's clearly a chemical reaction that's happening with my hormones and my brain and my body working together. And it was really that moment where I realized, awakened, whatever you want to say, that I needed help and I needed to ask for it. And so I'm crying. I'm very, the teacher's still a bit like, I don't know what to do
What
with
to do?
you.
Yes.
And my mom's feeling a bit like, what's happening? Oh no, is she going to have another, mental breakdown? Because I've been having these as well. But instead, I turned to her and I looked at her right in the eyes and said, I need help. And it's not a little ask for help, it's a big ask for help. I'm right on the edge of ending it all, and I need some serious medical attention. And I did. That's when she very much stepped forward as an amazing mother that she is, and helped get me on the path to I started initially with some counseling and psychiatry, and I did for a while go on antidepressants.
Mm.
And then I found the most amazing psychologist,
Mm.
and I realized I didn't want to not feel the feelings. I didn't want to be on the antidepressants and numb the feeling. I wanted to be able to work through all the feelings. And I needed some tools to be able to, really help process that. And that's when I was finally diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Mm.
And my psychologist was amazing. It was a practicing, or I believe he still is a practicing Buddhist. And so he started
Mm.
to introduce me to mindfulness practices, and he got me reading John Kabat-Zinn's work.
Oh, wow.
It was amazing. And then he did EMDR with me. So eye movement directional rehabilitation. That was really big for changing my relationship to the feelings and to the trauma. And I saw him every 2 weeks for about 5 years.
Mm.
Yeah. And it was yeah, I mean, I am here to this day for so many reasons, but one of them being the work I did with him,
Mm.
and him being the practicing Buddhist and seeing my love of yoga. He
Yeah.
encouraged me to stay on the path of yoga. And through that whole process, he just kept nudging. He just says, you're going to keep practicing all these things. And one of them is giving yourself the opportunity to stay in your body, to
Mm.
not always live in your head, and to be in your body.
Mm.
Yeah, and so that's like, it's such a long story. There's so many like paths and little turning points that happen in that journey, but that's sort of the gist of it to some degree on how I found yoga, really.
What a journey you've been on. What a journey. And, when you're sharing that moment, that taking your class, you went with your mom and you took the class and something, and you said it so beautiful about getting into the body. And there's a lot of research about rumination. It's a precursor for depression. The more we're lost into thinking, the more it's going to trigger these spiraling triggers. So, I'm trying to kind of go back to see that this teen you version, right?
Yeah.
And it must have been so scary, and also the courage to be willing to feel and ask for help, and that's something many people don't do. So, what would you say, looking back, what would have anything else that would have supported you in doing that? Because sometimes people don't ask for help, and you did something about that. So I'm wondering, knowing what you now know on that
Mm.
day, what helped you seek help?
Hmm.
In addition to the class that seemed to have given you an experience.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's a great question. What's interesting about that as well is that I still see to this day, 20 plus years later, um, that reoccurring theme of it's okay to ask for help. And so when I analyze it, there's this, and perhaps it's a generational thing, perhaps it's a family thing, but that being independent was very much praised as, and my mom being a businesswoman and a feminist, to rise above that, to be strong enough to stand on your own two feet was very much, yeah, like I said, praised often in our family and in my life. And so to ask for help perhaps shows some sense of weakness. Like I don't believe that now, but that perhaps is a theory or a story I was telling myself. And so already feeling very weak, having had the trauma, really needing help, like being in a wheelchair, being in crutches, or my stepfather having to like help put me in a chair in the bath or in the shower so that I could, wash myself. And, those are very vulnerable moments in which you don't feel very strong or independent. And so if I could have found a source to help me recognize the power in asking for help and saying what it is that you need earlier, that perhaps that would have motivated me to that place. I think what happened in the yoga class was, yes, about being in my body and allowed for this union of connection to myself in a different place, but it was really the realization that I didn't want to die. And
Yeah.
so the courage came from the motivation not to die,
Mm.
and knowing that I needed to be vulnerable, to be weak to some degree, and again, that's just a story, that's not truth, to
Mm.
ask for help. um, the fear of death was the motivation to push me in that direction.
Yeah.
And courage isn't that the fear isn't there, it's just that the desire to overcome that fear is greater. So
Mm.
the desire for me in that moment to not die, because I was so close to it again, that it forced me into having to ask for help.
Mm.
And so now I don't need such a strong motivation,
Right.
to be like, hey, can someone help me over
Yeah.
here? Because I've gone through so many different stages in which I've had to ask for help. Um, but if you do come from that background where perhaps independence was praised so much that you feel a sense of weakness in asking for help, I'm not sure I know how to assist aside from being curious about what could motivate you to see the value in asking for help. Because I know when people ask me for help, I'm excited to help.
Yes.
And so when I remember that, when I think, oh, well, I love helping other people. So what a gift someone gives me when they ask me for help, because then I get to help them.
Oh.
And so that could be a way of looking at it.
Mm.
It is such a deep sense of connection to someone else to say, I need your help. It's
Yeah.
that's scary, right? Because will it be received is another thought. But perhaps, I don't know if I fully answered your question, but
Gosh.
gave some interesting insight, perhaps.
Really, really beautiful how you said it, because you're giving someone also a chance, an opportunity to be of, they can support someone. So you're denying them that chance. If you don't ask for support, you're denying that person, but it also, we're denying ourselves the potential for change.
Yes.
That's really something. And, since then, the work of Brene Brown about the power of vulnerability, and it's being more talked about. And you're so right. There's power in connect and being vulnerable as a strength. And you see that now. It has actually supported you in creating the change. It's part of
Yes.
your warrior energy, actually. That is felt like Lauren is real here, open, authentic as is. Like you're not
Aw,
trying to be something else, right? You're not trying,
yeah.
no, I'm supposed to look a certain way and be a certain way and not look vulnerable because that's weak. That's hard to relate to, hard to connect with. And
Yes.
I think that's one of your superpowers.
Aw, thank you. I mean, that's like such a compliment.
Yeah.
I've worked hard to,
Mm,
it is a constant practice to
mm,
show up and just be authentic to where you are, which isn't always what society wants us to be, which is perfect and, polite and pretty and quiet and all those things. Sometimes it's dirty and it's gritty and it's sad and it's heavy. And so I think being in yourself is really a constant practice.
oh, ongoing.
Yeah, ongoing.
Mm. And,
Yeah.
and I can imagine, when this began for you, it must have been really challenging because the relationship with oneself may not be, at that age, a completely loving, looking, knowing that, wow, I can't walk as well, or here are some scars. It may not be loving these things then. So, what was that like as you kind of worked with, change your relationship to like,
Yeah.
like right now?
Yeah. I
This is
mean, as a
trauma,
17,
pain.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, as a 17-year-old, your external appearance, the way in which you engage with yourself is usually from this external world. Like the external environment is sort of impacting your internal experience of yourself. And so when all of this happened, I really started to notice a few things. One, how my external world impacted my internal identity, and then also how my internal identity impacted my external world and how those two energies played with each other, um, and how I could change or manipulate or cultivate a certain experience by working with the two. So for instance, being in nature can help settle my internal angst.
yeah.
Just like sitting quietly or being self-compassionate with myself can make my external world a little bit softer as well. And so that we can manipulate or cultivate an external experience to help create an internal peace, or I can help create an internal peace to perhaps soften my external experience. And so that's kind of like one way of considering it. It was a long process. It wasn't until, gosh, I can't actually remember the first time I was introduced. I can't remember the year. It's
Mm.
all a bit of a blur. But I remember the first time I picked up Dr. Kristen Neff's work.
Oh
And I
yeah,
know you're familiar with
compassion.
her,
Yes, self-compassion.
self-compassion. And so if we flip back to what I mentioned about my psychologist, he introduced me to the practice of mindfulness and mindfulness meditation and being present to myself, being present to everything in the moment, like your life depended on it, right? That sense of urgency for where I am and what I'm feeling. And that was so powerful. However, what do we do in the moment when things are really heavy?
Mm,
And it wasn't until I was reading Dr. Neff's book that I realized like how heavy and dark and negative my internal dialogue and conversations were. And however healed my external form was, my internal dialogue when things were heavy were still very negative. And then I started reading her book more, and I do what I do, which is I then seek these people out. And I went and did a workshop with her and her partner, Dr. Christopher Gerber.
mm,
And we went through the practice of self-compassion, of being mindful of what it is that's happening, turning towards myself with kindness, and recognizing the common humanity, like remembering that we're not alone, that many people have gone through similar experiences of me. Many people are suffering and currently in this moment. And it gave me tools like holding my hands to my heart, recognizing that what I say to myself makes a difference with how I'm feeling. It can feed it and make it worse, or it can soften it and make it better. And it doesn't take it away, but I can be there for myself when
mm.
I needed to. And that fed my independent woman, of course, but
Yeah.
it gave me I'm very tool based, I'm very action oriented. And so it gave me something physically to be able to do in towards myself. So I was even saying this to my daughter the other day. She was having a tough time, feeling very down. And I
Mm,
asked her, well, what are you speaking? How are you speaking to yourself right now? And she goes, well, I don't know. I'm just kind of down. And I feel like my brain is just focusing on all the down things. I
mm,
said, well, that makes sense. And could you possibly speak to yourself like you would speak to your friend who was expressing to you what she was feeling, just like you are now? And she kind of looked at me. She did the 13-year-old, like, oh, mom, like,
I
eye
know.
roll. She's been in my life since she was born, right? So, like, she's used to this. And I said, well, sweetie, when things get really heavy for me, often I'll place my hands on my heart, which she's seen me do. And I'll say to myself, as crazy as this sounds, oh, sweetie,
Mm,
I know this is really heavy. This is really heavy. This is really
mm,
heavy right now. And sometimes I got to say it a lot. And I literally say to myself, oh, sweetie, or oh, babe,
mm,
and it's, yeah, just being able to turn to myself. So I wasn't capable of doing that in my 20s. My 30s, I was feeling like ready. I was aware of the negative self-talk
mm.
and how I had the ability to shift that.
You know, this way you connected with compassion on a visceral level. So it wasn't a theory. It wasn't just a theory, oh, this thing we do there. You experienced it. And I've seen this in mindfulness-based stress reduction as well. This 8-week program where we bring mindfulness and compassion. And whew, when people connect to how they work with themselves, how they meet themselves, the pain, the corners they don't want to turn to, like, I don't want to look there. And then gently, slowly, not forcing, right? Like, it's not like now we have to look at the dark stuff. It's like we're slowly turning, looking, slowly meeting. And your description just feels like this journey of slowly befriending. There's all these parts of you befriending the pain, the dark parts, which really for me makes even more sense why you shine so bright. Like, it's so true. When I first did the training with you, I had no idea of your story, but you walked into the room, I'm like, this human being is like a projector light. But it makes sense. It makes
Yeah.
sense how you've worked with things.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Yeah.
It's not like the trauma doesn't go away.
Mm,
I hear a lot people say things like, well, it'll get better with time. It depends. Like, it depends on what
mm,
you're willing to do during that time. But then also, it's not that the trauma goes away, but the relationship to your trauma changes.
mm,
And so I'm still triggered. I still have a very heightened nervous system. I still have levels of suffering in my life like everyone has. I've been through, this world pandemic like everyone else has, and that's brought up different things as well. And so what's interesting on that process of befriending myself, like you said, is that I will still have times where I notice the negative patterns coming back in. At a young age, I somehow learned that, or I don't know if it's a societal thing or a nature thing or a Lauren thing, our ability to handle the stress through either numbing or changing or having that dialogue. And the people that I speak with, they agree, like, raise your hand if you've said things to yourself that you would never say to anyone else.
mm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I
Yes,
would.
yes.
And so it's a common human thing, sadly, that we do this. And so when I notice that I'm falling into that pattern again, I'm so grateful to have that skill to be like, whoa, Lauren, babe, like, that's heavy. Is that necessary right now? Like, that
Mm,
feels aggressive. Like, I wonder how I could make this a little easier on myself. Like, you know, what do I need right
mm,
now to feel safe?
mm,
What do I need right now to feel grounded?
mm,
And so it by just letting myself soften, by just like holding myself in that moment of pain and that moment of darkness again, it it offers me the opportunity to see the choices I have and
ah,
to like move in a direction that serves. And so that's been really interesting. And perhaps that's why I still love yoga so much. If it was just like a fitness fad, I feel like I would have given it up on by now. And I do other forms of movement as well. But
Yes.
what I love about yoga is that it speaks to the movements and
Mm,
it speaks to the breath. The breath, I'm a big advocate of the breath.
mm,
And it speaks to our mind and that connection, that it's not separate. It's all interwoven. And, sensations are going to invoke thoughts and conversations.
mm,
And thoughts and conversations are going to invoke sensations. And so, can I create space
mm,
by allocating, 30, 45, 60 minutes to myself and have this space in which I can just be open and present and non judgmental and listen to sensations and listen to conversations and perhaps gather some perspective, and
mm,
from there perhaps see where I need to go, what choices I have, what direction I need that day. Do I need to be softer that day? Do I need to be more productive that day? Do I need to, stretch my glutes more on that day? Like, it can
yes.
go any way, but it's space and time
Mm.
to be there with me.
It feels so honoring of what has happened and allowing space for it, that if it comes back, that there's room for it. And what I'm
Yeah.
hearing from you is, even when some activation around memories or the trauma or the sensations or the thoughts around it, it's not about the getting rid of everything. Is about when it arises, you have the freedom to choose how to work with it. And that to me feels the power in what you've done in this work. Is that's the freedom. Is once it's here, is how do we meet that? And
Yeah.
that's how you seem to have navigated through all these practices of mindfulness and yoga. And it's like, how do I work? And the counseling you've done, you've brought all of it together to navigate with what shows up.
Yeah. Something that I say to myself often when I notice when I either when I'm reacting or when I notice the reaction or when I feel the desire for a certain reaction because I've been triggered or something.
Mm,
And even I notice when a client or I'm in session with someone or I'm working with someone, whether it be in fascial stretch therapy or a private session or even a group setting, and someone comes up to me after, is I say, "Isn't that interesting?"
mm,
Like, I'll say it to myself, it'll come up and I'll go, wasn't that interesting?
mm,
And what I love about that statement is it allows for space to just like step back and kind of just be really curious about that. Like, that was an interesting reaction, or that was like an interesting feeling, or that was an interesting thought, or
mm,
that's an interesting story. And so, like, when you think of all the things that you get really interested in, it kind of takes you into this like broader, kind of more spacious, curious
mm,
place where you're like, whoa, wow, okay.
mm,
And then I just like ease into further exploration,
mm.
unless, and it's not that, oh, that's stupid, or oh, I can't believe you said that,
Judging.
or that's for sure. That sense of certainty kills any sense of curiosity as well, right? When you're like, well, this is the only way, where you're like, well, is it? There's so many ways.
Mm,
And so I feel like the more, I ebb and flow through beautiful times of joy and harmony and still times of struggle and suffering and pain, is that I keep space to be curious about
yeah.
myself and what I'm feeling and my relationships.
Mm,
And the yoga practice is kind of the constant space I've created.
mm,
So perhaps that's where, like, you would, maybe someone would have a mindfulness meditation practice, or someone would have like a breath work. Like, my yoga practice includes those things, but I've just encompassed it I call it a yoga practice.
yeah. You know what's quite amazing as you're describing it? The quality of your curiosity is what I've seen in people who truly create change. And mindfulness teaches that curiosity. But it's a different kind of curiosity. It's not an analyzing or why. Sometimes people veer off to why, how come, and it becomes analyzing, um, trying to figure out. But you bring a different kind of open curiosity, sensations. Oh, what's the feeling here? What's what's the thought here? And being with that. So can you say a little more about that? This not
Yeah.
to figure out and analyze, but actually just being with.
Yeah. I think what's interesting about that and the way you said it is that my understanding of the whys have come with the more that I just create space for not trying to understand it. So, for instance, um, my dad is dying. I kind of outed myself in an email recently to you. He has ALS,
Mm,
which is a horrible disease. And so, of course, whether you've lost a parent, which I know you have, or people going through losing their parents or just losing a loved one in general, and watching them die slowly is horrible. And so it's been creating a lot of feeling, and he lives further away from me. So there have been a lot of sensations, a lot of, kind of reminiscing about certain things, old feelings rising up, inner conversations rising up. And so I'm allowing myself to create some space
mm,
to, isn't that interesting? Like I didn't realize when I'm feeling this sad that I say that to myself. Isn't that interesting? Or when I'm having a difficult time sleeping, noticing that it's not just my mind that's stuck on something, but it's the sensations that are happening in my body, like
mm,
noticing, like, wow, I didn't realize like how elevated my heart rate is when I'm thinking about this thing. And
mm,
so I'm not trying to control my heart rate or my breath, even though there's good reason to do that sometimes too.
mm.
But I'm just opening up the space to be like, wow, I didn't realize that. So if I
Yeah.
didn't have the space to be open to noticing something new. So let me give you a totally different non-personal example. You're on your walk, like, and I feel like lots of people have like their usual walk. Do you have
Mhm.
a usual walk?
Yes.
Okay. And
Yes.
so you're going down and it's familiar, yes?
Yes.
And so like most of the things that are going to happen, most of the landmarks, you kind of go and you can get to a point in your walk where you're not really aware of where you're walking. You're just kind of like doing all the things. You can do the same thing when you're driving.
Mm,
But if you allow, and again this speaks to mindfulness,
mm,
space to just be aware, you can notice new things on the walk that you may haven't noticed before.
mm,
And maybe it's seasonal. Maybe you're walking and you've always noticed the crack on the sidewalk at this certain point, but then in the spring, you noticed something growing from the crack,
mm,
or maybe you were walking and you always pass the same person, but you didn't create enough space to maybe really recognize the features of their face,
mm.
or maybe you haven't taken a moment to notice like the dog that they're walking, or
Yes.
its tendencies, and so I guess similar to mindfulness, creating space to be curious, to be like, well, this is really interesting, allows for me to be in the present moment, not clinging or attaching to any expectations I have of how I should or could be in this moment, but being interested in how my body is actually kind of just going into its places naturally anyways. And so
Mm,
it's interesting to note that this is how my body feels when I'm feeling sad, or that these are the tendencies the conversations my mind has when I'm feeling excited.
mm.
Or do you know what I mean? And so we can get so wrapped up in it
Yeah.
that we leave space to notice it.
And I can imagine there's less resistance with that too. Like
Yes.
this type of being with has less of a like because it's normal for us to go, I don't want this. I mean, this is the natural default we have. Pain, unpleasant, no thank you. But often we're resisting the pushing, the hating. actually makes it worse. So it seems this
Yes.
curiosity is just being with, in a way, getting to know it. Like, oh, what's actually here?
Yes. And so again, sometimes we over intellectualize things. And so what I love about yoga is that, in a yoga class, even if a small session, like 30 minutes or so, you're going through the paradox of sensations in your body,
Uh,
right? You're having like moments of
yes.
bliss and you're like, oh, this feels so good. But then you're also like sometimes very quickly having moments of discomfort and moments of intensity and moments of frustration.
Um,
And so what yoga teaches us is to, or has the possibility to, is create some space to notice, your innate reactions or desires to respond in those certain ways. But it also, I would like to think, gives you the authority to recognize when those sensations are warning signals. Like, are the sensations of your body saying this is harmful? You need to get out. Like, please listen to those sensations, like
yes.
respond skillfully, get out, get help, move forward, or are these sensations uncomfortable but not harmful?
Mm,
How can I linger in this place without making it worse?
mm,
And so again, it's that space to choose. And so kind of starting with that's interesting
mm.
is an opening to kind of veer in any direction, possibly.
Yes. And I can see how wisdom is really knowing that difference through experience, knowing that, oh, I'm maybe it's too much now, or maybe I'm not turning toward it. Like just knowing when and actually listening. Otherwise, as you said, it may be just re-triggering. Because sometimes in our North American culture, there's a lot of like, do more, push more, try harder. And sometimes I find with pain and trauma and a lot of challenges we have, if we just push, the backfires. So you're
Yes.
showing this way of tuning in, when to go in, when to not. But all of it requires, as you said it beautifully, to be open to the experience in the moment.
Yes.
So,
And feel empowered that you have choices in those moments. So if you can have that little pause, as you know, that little bit of space before you just react, right? Like sometimes helping people just discern the levels of sensation, the level of discomfort can be really wise and informing because, there is a fine line between like harmful and just okay.
yeah,
You
yes,
know what I mean?
totally.
And so, like, where is that fine line for you? And we don't need it to be, if you go home and you can't walk the next day, like it was too far.
That's too
You know what
much.
I mean? And sometimes we need to have it, but like, don't give up on it completely. Like, can you come back to it softer? Can you come back to it a little bit more aware? Can you come back to it with a little bit more space? Can you ease into it a little bit slower so that you can be present to the reactions or the tendencies in the habits in those moments, and then skillfully make a choice
Yeah,
and see where you could go that would serve you better is an opportunity that we have in this really cool practice, and it really in all aspects of our life if we're open to it because it transfers.
true. It's true. Because otherwise it will be discouraging. Like as soon as there's some setback, if we're not using that information to adjust, it really can lead to hopelessness. Like, oh, it was too much, nothing works, I'm not progressing in my recovery from whatever is the challenges. But you're using it as information to keep working with. I was, there's a word used a lot in kind of regression sometimes is needed for progression, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes we need a bit of,
Yes.
okay, and now, okay, and now, oh no,
Yeah.
okay, right? So sometimes we forget that and we just want straight progress. And
Yes.
I wish I
And if
was
you
like that, by the
Yeah. Me too, by the way, me too.
way.
And then you could really just forget things. Maybe they'll come
Totally,
up with a way that we
totally.
can just turn off little things from the
Yeah,
past.
yeah,
But this idea that we could, like our evolution sometimes requires us to like go back to the past, go back to the wisdom of the past. So sometimes I'll consider what can I take from my past experiences that would help me right now?
yeah.
And like what are some of those things that I I could be reminded of right now.
Mm.
And, again, it requires time for myself, whether I'm nature walking or sitting in meditation or moving through my practice, some time to consider, what do I need right now? And what are some wisdoms of my past that could help me? And
Mm.
yeah, my dad can't speak anymore. He is unable to talk anymore. And so but he can still walk. So when my sister and I went to go visit him, we would go for walks together. And it was interesting in the beginning, my sister and I would fill the awkward silence with talking. Like we would just be blah, 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 talk, 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 sharing stories, etc. There's nothing wrong with that. We hadn't seen him in a while.
Mm.
But as the days went on, and her and I would go back later and talk, just the two of us. And I said to her, I'm I'm noticing how uncomfortable I am by the fact that he can't speak. And so I'm noticing I'm unnecessarily speaking to fill that discomfort. And she laughed like you did and said, "Oh, whoa, I'm probably doing the same." And so we both acknowledged it and then agreed that as we went out, we would kind of just notice the discomfort and not fill the space unnecessarily. Like if something came up, if we noticed something, if a story was really meaningful, share it, like don't hold
Mm.
back. But if we're just trying to fill space because we're uncomfortable, can we resist that?
Yes.
And on the last day that we were there, we went for a walk, and I would say 90% of it was in silence.
Mm.
And it was amazing,
Mm.
And as you know, silence is powerful, but just how uncomfortable it was initially. And then to just notice my discomfort and kind of be nice to myself in that moment and, settle in my body a little bit and just lean into that.
Mm.
The discomfort started to dissipate. And this really beautiful shared experience happened between my sister, my dad, and I.
Yeah.
And so there's something really beautiful, as you say, in our darker spaces, if we can be open to
Mm.
just seeing it as interesting
Mm.
and having some safe space, perhaps with some guidance or safe people
Right,
to
right.
help us, navigate that space for us. But it's really a gift.
Yeah. And I'm sure it was a gift for your father as well. Your willingness to be so real with yourself of, oh, I'm feeling that space. I'm uncomfortable. And I'm sure he could feel that when it's just filling space and then being with just just your loving heart being with his loving heart. That's
Yeah. I
he
think we forget that we're feeling beings.
yeah, yeah.
We're thinking
We're like,
beings. Everyone seems to
yeah,
be
yeah.
okay with that. But like
Yeah.
feelings are twofold. Feelings involve thoughts and sensations.
Yeah.
And so the sensations are perhaps the gift of yoga that for me is a feeling really engaging in my sensations and like connecting with the body language and
Mm.
the instincts that come from being so in tune, which is like a blessing and a curse.
Yes. Both of them, for sure. For
The
sure.
paradox exists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that quality moment that you created between your sister and your father, and I'm sure he is so proud of you.
Aw, he does. He does say that. Yeah, he can send us messages, and we all. Yeah, I mean that's the gift of someone passing and knowing that they are terminal is that we can really have closure to some degree. So, and it was a beautiful just the consensus of feeling across the three of us. He wasn't able to vocalize it, but you could just feel this settling occur the longer we were on the walk and the more we all just settled in this place of being together.
Mm.
Yeah, it was really, yeah, so I'll never forget it.
Yeah. That's a memory that can be cherished forever.
Yes. And one that initially was really scary and
Mm.
really hard. And so again, the courage to be uncomfortable, within my own parameters.
Of
And
course.
yeah, and I have that space to just Yeah, lean into it a little bit. It's interesting. It's really, you can learn so much about yourself when you're in that space. But it helps, I'd like to back it up, to know that I am my best friend, that no matter what happens in those moments of discomfort, in those darker times,
Mm.
that I am a soft landing. You know what I mean? If I
Yeah.
was so judgmental again, because I used to be, then whatever experience I'm going through, the foundation of who I am, the inner aspect of myself, if it wasn't soft, it may not have been, none of these experiences may have been as profound as they are or as useful as they are, because I would just be judging, criticizing, beating myself up. Like yoga can be another opportunity to beat yourself up. You know,
Yeah.
meditation can be another opportunity to beat yourself up. When I started to realize how negative I spoke to myself, how my internal conversation was so aggressive, I
Mm.
was shamed. I felt shame that I did that to myself. I felt a huge sense of remorse. And Dr. Neff and Dr. Gerber talk about that in regards to, um, this backdraft, when you start to realize how heavy you are to yourself, like what things that you do, and you go through a process in their training to like say thank you to all those habits and that inner voice, and make amends to it. But it's again a process, and I'm really grateful to be a soft landing for myself.
Mm. You were sharing this practice of soft landing earlier, and I love it if you share with us this maybe a few minutes of guidance. What do you think of this?
Mm,
A few more moments of guidance of
yeah,
something that maybe the listeners, there's something that they're having a challenge with, like being with, and this turning to this. The way you said it just felt so visceral. So, would it
yeah,
would love it if you can
yeah,
just
let's do it.
give us a few moments, however you wish.
Yeah, let's do that. I like to say, like, an inner inventory. Let's kind of check in with ourselves. So
Yeah.
wherever you are, find a seated position. And I would encourage you, if you can, to like uncross your legs and lower your seat if you need to, so that both of your feet are on the floor. And you can gaze down at a spot, like feel free to find a spot in front of you to look at, or if it feels okay, if it feels safe to close your eyes, please close your eyes. And for a moment, we're just kind of like closing the door on other things that were happening. We're to some degree creating like a little page break here and arriving consciously in our body in this moment. And just take a moment to observe your body. Just notice, maybe at first, just how it feels to be sitting as you are. Perhaps noticing if there are any areas you could consciously relax, maybe your shoulders, maybe your hips, maybe your jaw. And there's lots of different ways of noticing sensation in your body, but perhaps for today, just label in your mind sort of the location in your body in which you feel sensations. You're not even necessarily distinguishing the sensation. You're just, I feel something in my shoulders. Maybe you feel something in one side of your hip or your back, or just label the location of where you feel things. And notice now you could consider those sensations. Let's go a little step further. And if you can, describe to yourself the sensations you're feeling. So perhaps it's, I feel tension in my shoulders, or I feel heavier on my left hip. Maybe you feel cold in your hands and feet. Whatever you're noticing is fantastic. Try not to carry on with it or judge it, or just be like, that's interesting. Notice this area of my body, and it seems to be like this. And of course, generally the louder sensations come forward first, but can you also notice the subtle areas? Can you notice in your mind the areas that feel soft and relaxed? You notice the areas of your body that feel warm. And then keep some space here and again, without carrying on, just notice your mind. And perhaps you're noticing your mind over analyzing the sensations, or maybe your mind has wandered a bit and you're noticing a problem that's coming back, or maybe the pace of your thoughts are busy or slow. Again, just how would you describe your mind right now to yourself? And as you notice these things about yourself, can you maybe literally say to yourself, well, that's interesting, or create some space within that context of this is interesting? And maybe noticing how the mind feeds certain sensations, or how sensations feed a certain thought or conversation. That's interesting. Maybe you're noticing it's familiar. Maybe you've felt these feelings before. Maybe you haven't noticed them in a while, or you've never noticed this at all. But again, that's interesting. And perhaps what you're noticing that's interesting is a certain direction everything is going. Maybe it all feels heavy and dark and negative. Or maybe it feels soft and light and joyful. Or maybe it's somewhere more gray in the middle. Again, that's interesting. And I would encourage you at this time, if it's leaning more towards the heavier, the darker, a little more gray, a little more black, can you soften your shoulders a little more? Can you say something to yourself that you would say to a loved one if you knew they were feeling this way? Maybe it's just an acknowledging the heaviness of this moment. Oh, sweetie, I know this is heavy right now. I know this pain in your back's been here for a really long time. I know when you notice your body, it reminds you of something else. What would you say to yourself? And maybe you're on the other side. Maybe you feel a sense of gratitude for this overwhelming sense of joy or this level of peace in your body. And can you just be in that a little longer? What a gift. Maybe it's a recognition of the work you've done. Well done. Your willingness to stay here, to be here. Wherever you are, may you continue to be the soft landing. May you remember that you're not alone, that I too am suffering and have suffered, and that we together can get through this. And it's not that we need to push it away or make it go away completely, but that we can be here. Isn't that interesting? Together, feeling And I'm going to continue to hold myself, and I'm going to continue to hold you. When you feel ready, you can direct your attention to your breath and maybe take a few breaths. Of course, when it feels right, kind of flutter your eyes open and adjust back to the light of the room. I feel like we could have gone on longer there.
Mm. It's hard to talk after that. What a beautiful guidance.
Thank you.
I can feel it in my body as you're guiding, and sensations and heat. I was realizing the room was warm that I'm in,
Mm,
and noticing sensations here and thoughts of, oh, I'm loving this, like commentary on this, what's happening. And this, what a beautiful way that you got me to directly experience, and the listeners, the range
mm,
of all of it is okay. It might be a moment of deep gratitude and joy, or feeling darkness, and anything in between.
mm,
Permission giving. Like I could feel this deep part of me just resting as I heard you.
mm,
Resting. It's like it's okay. This beautiful way that you said it, saying to someone, "Oh, sweetie, it's okay." Like this, kind of internalizing that voice, and that can serve so many people. This way you're being with. So truly,
mm.
thank you
Thank
for
you.
this beautiful guidance, and um, thank you for who you are.
Aw,
Really.
thanks. It
Um,
hasn't been an easy journey. I wouldn't necessarily wish my journey on other people, but
no.
I'm grateful to be where I am today and to, continue to do the work.
Mm,
And yeah, thank you. I'm glad that went well. I often include a little more breath work and yeah, some ways in which we can perhaps continue to find those softer qualities. And so I hope that whoever is out there listening can, find the practices that continue to allow space in their lives and selves. And perhaps when journaling or reflecting or noticing, isn't that interesting? Could that offer some further space
mm,
to be curious, kind curiosity, let's say?
mm. What a beautiful uh, homework for anyone who chooses to take it on. I know I will take it on. So thank you for that offering. And I wonder, how can people find you in terms of what's happening right now, what you're doing, your offerings? And I'll put the link at the bottom in terms of your website.
Yeah, thank
But I'm wondering, in terms of what are your offerings right now that people can connect with?
Yeah. So I'm winding down a little bit just near the end of the year. So I don't have anything initially, but starting next year I'll have different specialty classes and different trainings. So I do a yin training, I'll probably do a self-myofascial release training, a 200-hour yoga training,
Mm,
usually within my community. I still am on the faculty. Vancouver School of Yoga was bought by Rhodes Wellness College, so I'm on the faculty for Rhodes Wellness College.
yes.
But I do have a website, laurensyoga.com. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, just my first initial last name, so L Roegele. You can find me. I do my best to try and bring onto those platforms, some ways in which we can engage with ourselves or be mindful or move our bodies in a certain way.
Mm,
You can connect with me through my website, through email. I'm pretty low key. I like to be with people and yeah, come take classes with me. Some of my classes are virtual. I do have a little bit of stuff on YouTube, nothing too big. I'm pretty low key, small sense in the world of the social media stuff, but there's me out there somewhere.
mm. Well, we're all fortunate that there's you out there. So thank you. Really needing this such a shining heart. Thank you
Aw.
for your shining heart, authentic self, and your willingness to really be this walking. You're really walking the talk. Thank you for walking the talk. It's not an easy thing to do for anyone, and what a privilege to have you joining us today.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. And we'll look forward to connecting maybe in person one day again. Look forward to
Yes,
that.
would love that. Yes. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.